Good evening. Hi. It feels like it's really happening, so I'm not going to take long your time. My name is Virve Sutin. I'm the artistic director of Tanz in August, and I am so proud that you guys are here and you're here, and we're going to have a panel discussion about voguing in Europe. Very big title, cultural admiration or cultural appropriation. I am really interested to hear. You know, I'm a white girl, I'm going to go in a corner soon. So. Anyway, I just promised to shortly introduce the panelists. First of all, we are so happy that Brenda Dixon Gottschild is in Berlin and she's moderating this. So welcome. Then we have Niv Acosta. Let's give him a big applause. I truly think we witnessed today something pretty special. And tell your friends to come and see it, because it's something that happens here and now and at this moment. And it's a privilege to be able to host this company here at Tanz in August. Thanks for coming. Mother. We have two mothers here. We have Mother Leo Melody from Berlin. We have Madison Moore from London. And, okay, so we have grandmother, mother, and we have one more mother. Yes. We have Mother Stephane Mizrahi from Paris, New York. Let's also give a big applause to Berlin Voguing Out and Mic Oala, who made this happen. Thanks, Mick.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to start off with what I hope does not sound too ecumenical or too academical. But I wanted to give a kind of broad overview of the territory. One of the themes of last year's Tanz im August festival was, and I'm quoting from the festival book from last year, the investigation of the body in the age of multiculturalism and the concomitant questions about identity, appropriation, and cultural borrowing as part of the reality of cultural exchange and a result of the increasing contact between cultures. That was last year's Tanz in August magazine. This panel, Voguing in Europe, Cultural Admiration or Cultural Appropriation, is obviously a continuation of the same discussion. Our task today is to pose the question, how can European voguers explore and develop voguing without being exploitative and with indeed showing respect for origins? Then again, beyond our immediate concern today, and as Niv Acosta points out in his interview in this year's festival magazine, and I'm quoting you, Niv, the reason for Black futurity is to survive, to live another day and get through the struggle. We're dealing with Black futurity to create a conversation now to have a Black future. So before we go any further, I want to take you down memory lane. Like the ring shout and the original cakewalk during slavery days on American plantations in the Civil War era, pre-Civil War era. Like the dances white minstrels stole from Black minstrels during the height of minstrelsy, the 1870s through the 1920s. Like the foxtrot, the black bottom, ball and the jack of the 1920s, like the Big Apple, Spankin' the Baby, and the Lindy Hop of the 1930s and 40s. like the twist, monkey, pony, and the mashed potato, and all the animal dances of the 1960s, like the hustle and the dog of the 1970s and 80s, like house dancing of the 1990s, and through this millennial twerking era. Like all these goodies that white America and Europe and now a global population regard as usable artistic property, voguing, like all these colonial and post-colonial dance forms, was created as resistance dance, a resistance and challenge to the dominant culture, and born in a black space. We don't need your acceptance. We have creativity, intelligence, wit, irony, sarcasm, ingenuity, and integrity beyond your wildest imagination. What is it about Africanist, and when I use that I mean African and African American, what is it about Africanist expressive culture that's so darned attractive to people on this planet? Why are Russians voguing in Moscow? Why are Tibetans doing hip-hop in Dharamsala? Why is the whole world in love with Beyonce? How can one culture hold such global magnetism? Yet, on the other hand, blacks are systematically excluded from white ballet companies, from symphony orchestras, and so on. Whites can boogie down and own any black form they choose, but it is not a two-way street, and blacks are still shown the exit sign when we attempt to own white artistic property. Now that is whack. I just want to read you something from this is my third book, The Black Dancing Body. This was published 13 years ago, but very little, unfortunately, has changed. Okay. And I'm going to just read to you a couple of accounts that attest to the seductive power of the black aesthetic. I did a lot of interviews for this book. So this is from Sean Curran, Irish-American, who has his own dance company, is now the Dean of Dance at Tisch School of the Arts, NYU, and danced for years with Bill T. Jones. So he says this about a common practice in contemporary dance studios and by extension in other walks of contemporary life. I'm quoting him. It's sort of trendy to be in hip-hop class or to learn how to break dance or to be in an African class. And I think it's great, spread the word. But I've taught at studios where after my class, it's an African class, and there are people there treating it like it's an aerobics class. And to me, all dance is more sacred than that. And there's something icky or inauthentic, I don't know, about white women in do-rags and sarongs. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's a need, a want, a desire to be the other. I'm guilty of it too. I'll go into my Snap Queen thing and try that, or I sing along to the radio and try to sound like Destiny's Child or Peebo Bryson. Well, you know how dated this is, that those are his references, okay? And then here is Italian-American Brenda Buffalino, fantastic tap dancer. She's one of the people I interviewed for the book. Brenda Buffalino graphically depicts, quote again, the need, want, desire described by Sean Curran. She was raised in a white suburb of Boston and attended dance classes since she was a toddler, but never studied with a black teacher until she went to Boston as a teenager. And here's her quote. It was such a dramatic difference when I went to Stanley Brown's classes and I saw a contraction. I almost fainted from ecstasy. I will never forget that moment as long as I live. In his classes, this wonderful animal-like quality she says, because of the gestures of the dance and what the gestures called for that I continue to use in my work today. And I definitely do associate it with black dance, not European. When I saw that, I didn't see it as separated from my white body. I saw it as something that held promise for me in my white body. So it wasn't this separate thing. It was, as soon as I saw it, there was more of a symbiosis of, oh, that's also me. Very interesting. And now, seriously, it's just so. And then this last one is from Doug Elkins. Again, he is Jewish, Chinese American, grew up in Brooklyn as a hip hopper and break dancer. Doug Elkins, when asked if he wanted to add anything to wrap up our interview, gave several searing examples of cultural clashes, and finally wound up with the following observation, and I quote him, "Of the dynamic tension sometimes, cultural messages from all sides to come close but stay at arm's length. Come closer, but you don't understand me. I find it hilarious, fascinating, and compelling that Willie Ninja teaches young 16-year-old white girls who are entering the world of modeling to, quote, walk like a woman. So they are being coached by a gay black man in an over-exaggeration. Again, realness. I can wear all the accoutrements, the movement vocabulary, and do it bigger and better. The makeup game, I'm aware of what these things are, and they are actually constructions. I can play this game, and if you gave me the field, I would tear it up." Okay, so why am I saying all this? Well, I hope that it's clear why I'm saying all this. To end up my comments, and before opening my questions to the panelists and their self-introductions, let me refer you to an important work that you should read if you are serious about undoing racism. All right. I can, thank you, Helmut, yes, okay. Thank you.
Coates,
yes.
Between the World and Me.
Thank you. White people, or as Ta-Nehisi Coates would say, quote, the people who call themselves white, need to understand their own racism, but it is not our duty as people of color to be your teachers. White people, study your racism on your own time. Yes. Enroll in anti-racist workshops run by people of color, and take as many workshops as you can. One is not enough. It took your entire lifetime as a person with white privilege to become a racist. And all people who share white skin privilege, I hate to tell you, are racists. To undo and unlearn your inherited racism will take the rest of your lives. So yes, take courses with people of color. Attend panel discussions like this one. Then the most important part is what you do when you leave this room. Do you walk the walk, or do you only talk the talk? Look, right now, if you can, I hope on your seat you found the Unpacking the White Privilege knapsack. Were those on your seats? Take half a minute to quickly scan it and keep looking at them as this panel goes on, okay? Understand that every day, in every encounter with loved ones, casual acquaintances, and even strangers, you need to practice undoing racism if you want to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. Okay, now we can begin. So each panelist is going to take about 5 or 6 minutes, and I'll kind of time you. 5 or 6 minutes. Okay. To one, introduce yourself, however you want us to know you, this audience. 2, tell us why you agreed to speak on this panel. And 3, tell us what's the main problem you face as a voguing or a voguing affiliated person of color, okay? And, okay, we start with Madison.
Hello. So my name is Madison Moore, and I'm a cultural critic based at King's College London. And I write about, in my academic work, I write about performance, Black queerness, popular music, and I'm finishing a book right now on fabulousness that's coming out soon on Yale University Press. So line up at the bookstore when it comes out. And I guess one thing that really interests me in speaking on this panel is I'll actually just give you a real-time, real-world example. And it was maybe not last summer, but maybe 2 summers ago. I'm from New York City, and living in London, I'm like looking at the news from afar, things happening. And there was this screening of Paris is Burning at the Brooklyn Museum that was initially supposed to have a talkback. And the talkback was with J.D. Sampson and Jenny Livingston herself. So thereby no people of color, no queer people, no one from the rich, vibrant kind of New York voguing scene, not to mention the East Coast vogue, And so in my mind, I just got really frustrated that how can you be a responsible arts organization, for instance, and show a documentary that's about the lives and livelihood of people of color and trans people, and not have people of color in the talkback. Where are the receipts? And so I'm really interested and passionate about making sure that we are responsible in how we think about and talk about voguing and cultural appropriation. And I'm reminded and drawn to the cultural critic Paul Gilroy, who talks about how blackness, black popular culture, black performance traditions are, and remember this, are inherently promiscuous. So they spread. That's the tenet of how they survive, is that they spread, they're promiscuous. So this is a really powerful idea that I keep in my mind when we think about why we're voguing in Russia and hip-hopping in these places, right? And I think that, culture is something that you can't really, I'm not sure if you can kind of protect it and keep it on your own and kind of guard it in a certain way. But what you can do is you can support artists and people of color who you know. You can educate yourself. You can read, Marlon Bailey's book, Butch Queens Up in Pumps, which is the first oral history of voguing culture in Detroit, written by a black queer person.
Can you give that again?
His name is Marlon Bailey, MarlonBailey. Write it down. Butch Queens Up in Pumps is the book, right? You can, instead of screening Paris is Burning, you can screen Walk For Me, the new documentary by Elegance Bratton, who's based in New York. You can support artists like Kitty Smile. You can support Mr. Wallace. You can support Sean J. Wright. You can find black queer artists who are part of this community and support them, book them for your festivals, give them opportunity to play in your club, right? And a problem that I've experienced is exactly this, I would say, just this anger that this thing keeps happening again and again, right? So I live in London, and last week, or maybe, 2 weeks ago or so, there was another arts organization in somewhere in the UK, maybe Manchester, that was screening a document, Paris is Burning or something like this, and had, yet again, an all-white panel talking about voguing and this kind of culture. So I'm like, okay, look. So I just want to make sure that we have the tools to think about what's at work here, and that we can make sure to give the spotlight to black queer and brown POC queer artists, QT-POC artists, and maybe step a bit out of the spotlight.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. That was much less than
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephane Mizrahi. I am also the mother of the Mizrahi chapter in Paris. And when they told me that I could come here to express my viewpoints on voguing and ballroom in Europe, I was very excited. Why? Because it's growing, which is in America, it's already established. In Europe, it's growing. So there's mistakes that's being done there that we could probably avoid. In terms of my path, I lived 13 years in New York City. So I was amongst the Jack Mizrahi and Andre, and that's how I had the chance to experience ballroom, because in New York, it's the mecca of ballroom, I have to say. And then it started to spread all over the different states of the United States. So when I came back to Paris after those 13 years, I couldn't imagine that we could spread a movement so strong and powerful like that in Paris. Because what was hard at the beginning is that people knew about the dance voguing, but there was no places where you could go and actually like express and have a platform to express the dance and the dance style. So they used to do different dance events throughout Europe, and they put the voguing category in it. And I used to be like, but wait a minute, it doesn't belong into a dance event. It belongs into ballroom and at a ball. That's where you're going to see the dance style and what it's about, because this dance is directly connected with the culture. And it's sometimes hard to separate the two. And then I met a friend, and with the passion, we decided to create the ballroom movement in Paris. And this is why actually we have a ballroom in Paris after 7 years now that it's been going, and it keeps growing. So with that said, the difficulty that I'm facing is when big brand like L'Oreal or Lancôme want to use this art form, they do not want the authenticity of it. So they usually hire white people to water it down, if I can say. And because I think that they're trying to take the authenticity of it, the wham in your face of it, so it could be more accepted commercially. But I think it's a wrong move, because when you want to inspire and shock people or give a meaning to something, you should take something that comes to the source, I think. And that's why I think it is time to say it. And I think if they can at least do the United Colors of Benetton and have different people when they do those parties or events with different people of color, it would be more acceptable. What was the next question?
The last thing was, what do you see as the main issue facing you as a person of color who's in the voguing community?
Well, there's different issues. I would say the first issue is to make the scene grow. So I'm talking about ballroom. To have a ballroom community, and it has to grow. For it to grow, you have to cater to people, and they have to feel welcome to come into this platform to express themselves. Because it's an LGBT movement at first, and straight folks are welcome, but it's mostly LGBT expression. So you have to know where you're putting your foot in at first when you come. And to invite people into this platform, I think that they have to be aware that it is a competition. When you get to a ball, if you have the chance or the experience to go to a ball, you're going to realize that first, it is a competition. Then second, it is an expression and a self-expression. And I think that's why probably a lot of people are fond of that, because you can go to a ball and totally express your alter ego, which is very it's so amazing that you can go there and do that, because there's not a lot of platform where you can do such things. That's probably why people are so fond of this. And when I say people, I would say white people. My 5 minutes are up.
Your time is up, but that's okay because Madison didn't use all of his time. So you can have a minute more.
Yeah. And also, if I may say, it is also a place where if you feel rejected, at least there you're going to be seen. You may not be liked, but you're going to be seen. Which is already a good thing. Because staying in the dark is not, And because Europe also, it's not in America where you have states and you actually have the same culture. In Europe, you have different countries, different culture, different languages, and also a different way of seeing things and doing things. So this is probably also why, like in UK, the ballroom is different and is trying its best to establish itself. In Italy, it's also different, and they're trying also their best to establish themselves. And in Dutch, in Rotterdam, also is growing slowly. But I think the main goal is to remember that it is a LGBT queer expression, and to know your place. I think it's important to know that there's boundaries that you cannot cross, I think.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So, hello, my name is Georgina, aka Leo Melody, or Mother Leo Melody. So, yeah, I'm on this panel for several reasons. I'm the initiator of Berlin Voguing Out, and the initiator, so the mother, of the HAU Melody, the first German voguing house. And Berlin Voguing Out is the first organization or team that is working on voguing in Germany and spreading the culture. So basically in 2008, I kind of fell in love with voguing. It was kind of an accident. I went to take a class with Archie Burnett. And yeah, it was just a totally new feeling of body awareness, of personality, of expression. And Archie Burnett is also, except for that he dances voguing, mainly he's a dancer, a club head, a club dancer. So he loves the dance, he loves the club culture, the music, which have similar attributes to voguing culture, but still a bit different way of looking at things, I would say. So yeah, that's basically what I wanted to do here in Germany. In 2012, I was like, okay, I can't be voguing alone by myself here for the next 10 years. I need to do something. And yeah, so that's how I started. And now 4 years later, We established a growing community, also still in baby shoes. Put some nice baby shoes with a lot of glitter on them. And yeah, so basically I'm the initiator together with Mic Oala of this whole panel discussion, together with Tanz August that gave us this opportunity. Thanks again to Tanz August for offering this space for us to talk. And yeah, my position within the community, I would say, is a bit more complex. In the sense, yes, I am a person of color. So for a lot of people in America or in Europe, I have a right in a way to be there due to where I'm from. On the other hand, I'm mixed, so I'm also white. In a way, for some people not. Different issue, different panel. Yeah, but on the other hand, I am a straight woman. So on the other hand, I am a person that in a way is appropriating the culture for some people, a guest in the culture, a guest that loves the culture, somebody that tries to push the culture, somebody that tried to understand the culture first. Obviously, on my way, I did a lot of things without understanding first, but in the end, everybody has their journey, and definitely now we're at the point in our journey where we want to set things right. We want to learn from our mistakes. We want to find a way to connect the European communities, the people in the communities that share similar goals, maybe different ways of achieving them, which is also good to learn how it might work in Paris, which is totally different here. How we do it would not work in Sweden. Then again, we need to find a way to stay true to the culture and to the people who created the culture, and to definitely give them the spot, the credits, which they own. And yeah, so it's a very interesting journey, mixed feelings or mixed perceptions of our work that we do in Germany. Like I said, the point, being straight, being a woman, voguing.
So do you see that as the main issue for you?
I would say it's just the main points that I encounter. So it's yeah, in a way, yeah, a biological woman, yeah. Well, I mean, this is the terms people told me I should be calling myself, and another panel, but yeah, definitely this is. I wouldn't say issue, but it is a fact. It is a fact. It is true. Yeah, it's not a lie. And yeah, so I think it's something, a point that people have to get used to and feel, how do we feel about it? And how do we bring these people, in this case straight women, may it be black or white, which also seems to be a difference between that. How do we bring these people to the culture? How, at least for me as a personal journey in this culture, as a woman, what is my way of expressing myself? And how much can I really imitate of what I see? Because obviously there's an energy I see, an energy I would like to imitate, I would like to somehow feel and present, but it doesn't mean that I have to do it like that person. For example, in Vogue Femme, which is an expression of a man expressing a feminine expression, a gay man in this fact, and there's a lot of movements that go around the titties or right here. So me as a biological woman, I don't really need to do that because it's here. But obviously I could feel free to do it if that's my way of expressing myself as a woman. Because there are women that are more free with their sexuality. There are women that are more closed. So yeah, I think this is a journey, not really a problem. Not an issue, it's a journey. I would call it a journey.
Hi, I'm Niv, and I want to remember what the questions are, but I also just had a really long show, so excuse me if I'm a little delayed. But yes. Okay, introduce myself. Okay. Facing. Okay. So I am a performance artist. I also make other kinds of art. I just like to art a lot with black people. And I am also an activist. I'm an educator. I don't know, I make a training that's specifically for cultural producers about structural racism. And I work with different organizations to address their racial equity issues. Basically talking about structural barriers and how that impacts the decisions and the access that institutions have over communities that are of color that are coming to their institutions or not coming to their institutions. But also really wanting to work with community organizations to best bridge the relationship between cultural institutions like Tanz im August or Sophiensäle to community organizations like HAU or other ones that I'm still learning about. So I am interested in community building. That's very much my central thing. That's how I make my art. That's how I do my activism. That's how I live. That's how I thrive. That's my vitality. My relationship to my activism has informed my art and vice versa. And then therefore, through centering a black experience or through centering black community and black people, am trying to essentially, sometimes abstractly, sometimes very literally, change shit up, period. To better be inclusive and to meet more holistically the needs of artists and people of color. And I would say that I want to point out that Brenda is a new addition to this panel as the moderator. Yes, and I feel like I have to bring that up because this was very much a part of it was contingent on my participation, or my verse, you know what I'm saying. Basically, there was a white man who was supposed to moderate this discussion, and I approached the institution about Tanz im August about making sure that we had all black people up here speaking. Because I don't believe that it would serve anybody to have questions created or the lens of a white male. I don't know what his orientation is, I don't care. I would rather talk about a black issue with black people and centering our voices. So this was a very crucial aspect and a turning point for this panel. I by no means take credit for this because we should all be here. No one should be fighting for this shit, but we had to get here. And then in terms of my relationship to the voguing community, I'm quite voguing adjacent at the moment, but I kind of came up in the voguing community via the HIV/AIDS community. So my mom is HIV positive, and I was born HIV positive, but 3 months later, miraculously, was not negative. And so that's a thing. My mom still lives with HIV. She's not very much a part of the clinic community as much, but when we were coming up throughout my entire childhood, most of the people that took care of me or were considered my community were queer black men, queer trans women, and drag queens. And that's how I learned about gender. That's how I learned about performance. That's how I learned about my sexuality. I mean, this is essentially how I learned about my movement expression. And so I was very much raised inside of that community without even going to a function, you know? But just by the community members essentially being centered in this space, a clinic space, very like sterile environment. But something about the functions, we basically just had holiday parties, but they turned into a ball, like it turned into a key, like it was insta-gay. And we put on the music and we go for it. And that's how I learned, and that's how I, became a part of this conversation. And I struggle also with my place and not place in relation to voguing and ballroom, just mainly because I don't claim it. I don't claim that I am a part of that community. I do very much know the movement, and I love it, and I enjoy it, and I study it. I would study it for the rest of my life. But I by no means can claim any sort of expertise about the ballroom community, so I want to make that clear. However, I come through it through a community base. My community is this community. So that's my relationship to this conversation. And I very much, these are people I love, This is an issue that's quite deeply embedded in my heart. And so that is one thing. Did I answer all the questions?
What do you see as the main problem?
Oh, the main issue.
Yeah, and as I love what you said, voguing adjacent.
Voguing adjacent, yeah. So I feel like a big issue that I am quite privy to is just the European diaspora of voguing, right? And to be completely frank, it scares me a little. And it's not because it shouldn't be happening. I think, tell me your first name again, Boo. Stephane and Madison were pointing towards this, but basically, cultural appropriation is extremely problematic. Cultural appreciation, we're saying admiration here, which I want to point out is one word, and appreciation is another one. But those two things are both things that decentralize the people whose voices created this, right? So cultural appropriation very effectively is good at extracting what they need, right? Extracting just one aspect of this thing without having any context for why it was built or how, and like, how can they, right? And then whitewashing it. I'm gonna use that. You said cleaning it, or what was the word they used? Watering it down. I call it whitewashing it. And making it a digestible dose for white community or white gaze, right? And this is an issue across all cultures, right? This happens a lot. This is something that's been happening through colonialism, through all of this, right? So this is only one aspect, but something like cultural appropriation is quite dangerous to a community that is centered around essentially creating not only a pot of money that is circulating, but also a space, a safe space. And those two things being very, very vital for the community, and that's how it started. And so when people go like this, and they're like, I like this part, I'm gonna say it's this now, and this is voguing, you're completely invisibilizing and erasing all of the work and the meaning and the history and the people, right? And it pisses me off. That's why I'm getting angry right now. Because it's really, it's survival, right? Like when you fuck with people's money and you fuck with people's spaces, you're fucking with their survival. So cultural appropriation very effectively does this, okay? And it just is, this is essentially what I talk about in my training. That's why I'm like facilitator voice right now. But basically, it's very good at being like, I decided that this one aspect of voguing is voguing, and I'm gonna keep this and make this like a capitalist like venture, and forget about the people who matter in this conversation. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to keep aware of the time and to, of course, give you people a chance to say something. I just want to say what everyone has touched on is this thing also that I talked about in the Black Dancing Body, this whole thing of appropriation. This is what I call it: appropriation, approximation, and then assimilation. So what you do is like you take that thing, then you make it look like your culture. You or as I would say in the book, you whitenize it, and then it's assimilated, and you no longer recognize it. And again, that has happened throughout all of these things that I mentioned since plantation days. Just quickly, we'll throw out one more, because time is getting late. We'll throw out one more question to the panelists. Anyone can pick up on one of these questions, and then I would open it up to the audience. Okay. This is like an icky, sticky one, but let's just go for it, okay? And you've already kind of talked about it, but when voguing moves into white spaces, does it really start to look white, or does black space begin to invade white space, even though the black form is done by white dancing bodies? When voguing moves into white spaces, Does it start to look white? I mean, we've kind of posited probably yes, but let's just open it. Does it start to look white, or does black space begin to invade white space, even though the black form is done by white dancing bodies?
Can I throw one sentence in there, please?
What?
Can I throw one sentence in there just to make it more interesting? Start now. Especially with the dance, which is based on black men trying to look like white women in the first place, when it comes back. Let's not forget the DNA of voguing is so specifically based on moments of black gay men trying to be things, anything other than so-called stereotypically black. It's based so much on white fashion magazines and a lot, we're going to get into this, on Chinese martial arts. So in its DNA, it's so much based on a desire for becoming another or showing the possibilities of being another.
Okay, that's good, but you know what? Can we just hold on to that? I like that you're bringing this up. I like that you're bringing it up. I would like to, though, if we can, stick with the original question and let's see what they say, okay? So, you got the question, right? Okay.
Well, my answer will be, yeah. I guess it's a bit hard for me to say since I'm black and white. So I guess I could ask myself the question about my body. But no, but I'm just
We're all
gonna.
black and white, right?
Yeah,
and, you know,
I
when
mean,
you do it, you know,
yeah.
you'll find out that we all are. So,
Great.
and you know, we are, like if the train
Yeah.
came by, we would put you on the train with us.
I'm glad. I'm glad to know that. No, but what I wanted to say when it comes to voguing, that's definitely a question that maybe Stephane can answer better. But from a perspective that I'm looking at it, or what I see is definitely also a critical question, is the style, the grace, the technique, and then the understanding for the actual art form behind the flamboyant look of it. So you see people being all elegant and like, yeah, and then people want to do it and they think it's just like, yeah. And they come to a ball, they're like, oh, I see everybody on the runway doing this. Let me go with my cigarette and my beer and do this. So this is, at least from my point of view, a problematic thing that I see. Looking into voguing, yeah, maybe it's mainly white people approaching the dance like this, or the culture like this. So I guess this can also count for other colored people too, though. Yeah, that's all I would add to that question, yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to respond? Okay,
I think for me, for a white person, in order to get the real juice, they have to hang out with black people and live their daily basic life in order to face their struggles and what they go through. And if they're good at it and they pick on the right stuff, maybe you can express yourself as good as a black person would do in terms of voguing, because it's cultural. And because it's cultural, you cannot be a stranger to a culture and think that you're going to assimilate if you don't live it. I think
Well,
that's my point.
Yeah, I mean, I want to add to that thought, Stephane, just in terms of like how cultural assimilation has also been a big part of how immigrants and refugees have had to essentially navigate a new land. Assimilation being like a survival tactic, right? And like I'm really opposed to assimilation as like a thing, right? Because then it becomes like we're sort of like maybe paralleling it with appropriation. But I feel like in terms of movement or really anything that is cultural, right? Culturally specific, you really can't take any ownership or make any capital off of. You shouldn't be a culture that is not your own. It's not a lived experience of yours. You should not be going off and making money off of it. It's just, and money's only one aspect of this shit. Like claiming it and titling it. Like some people really believe that Miley Cyrus created twerk or that she put twerk on the map. And this is a problem because twerking was called twerking very recently. It's a movement that's quite old. It's from Northern Africa. And it has many iterations across the globe. And just like voguing, and I hope that this is, maybe you guys agree, but like the diaspora is important. It's very Africanist to share. Yes. And it's very Africanist to spread, right? To be like, hey, let's exchange information. But when it became extractive, when essentially colonialism happened, white people happened upon people that were not white, they were like very interested in what was happening. This is very interesting. I will align myself with these people, but then completely either kill them, rape them, you know, enslave them. And we can relate cultural appropriation to these things. It's not, I'm not being really weird right now or making a sweeping statement. It's very real, and this is how colonialism exists currently. And so for me, when you're thinking about the cultural exchange of any movement, of any culture, you should really be thinking about, okay, who owns this, right? Who are the people who are holding this space? If a twerk class is being led by a white woman, you should probably leave. You should get your money back. It's not, I mean, I know it's funny, but like, it's not a joke. Like, no person should be claiming that space besides a black woman, right? Or a black person who comes from this movement or knows it in their body quite deeply and is studying it and is creating communities to develop this shit, you know? And those are the voices we need to be centering in these spaces, not people who are like, I went to a class once, I watched Paris is Burning once, I went to a ball once. That's not okay. That's not okay. We're distancing. I'm going to make the same point again. We're distancing ourselves from the people who created this shit. And we need to remember who created them. And when people say, I did this, then, you know, basically the global amnesia sets in. People are like, wait, twerking though, Miley though. You know, and it's like, really, what? You just went straight up, like, invisibilized so much work. So much work and so much pain and so much struggle. I don't know if that's really answering your question, but Madison, do you have more to say on the topic?
Yeah, just, it's actually just a small thing, and it's that, you know, I moved to London like 2.5 years ago, and all the balls that I had been to, you know, like in New York and in Richmond, Virginia, and DC and this and that, were like almost always black people, people of color, like almost always, like that was the thing. And then when I moved here, or to Europe and started going to things, it was actually a moment of culture shock because I didn't know that it had spread. I didn't know, and so to then like have the inverse where I was like one of like the few black people in the room. This thing was like really difficult to deal with actually, and just thinking about it. But one thing that I've learned just is that, you know, people of color who come into voguing who maybe didn't, who are based in Europe, you know, get other things out of it. So they maybe learn to, growing up in white societies, learn to love, you know, their hair texture, for instance, through voguing, you know? And it's through that you kind of, so voguing has many different kind of ways of, being a kind of a tool and a place of survival for people of color. And it's essentially about, you know, I mean, if you go, like, I said I grew up in New York and, like, you know, not far from the pier where people were voguing all the time. I mean, like, I have so many memories of just walking up and down Christopher Street. Yes, God. And just, like, people voguing. I mean, it's just such a part of my life and kind of visual, like, archive. And it's really ultimately about creating, you know, black queer or queer of color space in a world that won't have you, actually. So be thinking of that as you know, put on functions or appropriate or whatever. So I'll stop.
Okay, and listen, I can open it up to the audience now. I would just like to say to the person who was talking about black men imitating white models, etc.
Not just white models.
Okay, about black men imitating white models, that, again, when you go back to things like the cakewalk or what have you, all of this that we're talking about has emerged from American culture and has then come here. But if you will imagine plantation era times and the cakewalk becomes enslaved African Americans imitating the whites' dances in an Africanist way. So there's always this kind of, and minstrelsy then. When blacks go into minstrelsy, they black up. So it's blacks imitating whites, imitating blacks, and those levels, those permutations of the illness of racism are very deep. So not to deny what you were saying, but this is something else that I was asking. So not to fight with me, but go ahead and ask what you want.
Some of you saw the videos I posted on the forum. I'm obviously, are Chinese people of color? First of all, let me say, I'm a friend, because there's a tendency at certain discussions where somebody's skin is not dark enough for everyone to pounce on them as the enemy, okay? And I think that's very, very wrong. Actually, I had a few points here. Specifically, I wanted to say, because, and don't come for me, because I was going to Merce Cunningham shows when I was 10 years old, and I was dancing with the Omnis in New York, House of Ultra Omni for 10 years, and I snatched 2 trophies back then, too. So, what I'm saying is, however, with voguing, it's very specific to this. The history of racism, all the oppression, the bullshit that black people have to deal with in America, too extreme. We all feel the same way about it.
Not just in America, all over the globe.
But you know, there are different, and France is also, France will have colonies. I'm not saying Germany is an exception, but the situation is different for blacks, somewhat different, in differing degrees, in places like Germany and places like Scandinavia. We cannot deny that for all human beings, if we are to believe in a hope of some kind of universal, everybody coming together, and not only black people have the right to talk about this, then we also have to talk about the DNA of voguing. Because voguing specifically, especially the way I learned it from my instructor, Salahuddin Muhammad Omni, who's quite a dance theorist, he danced with Alvin Ailey, would always say, remember, voguing is not just a black and white thing. If you look at the movements that voguing borrowed from, I don't want to say appropriate, because that's an ugly word, and it's always an accusation of a crime. Voguing borrowed specifically, not just from the white models, Dovima, Susie Parker, from the film Funny Face in 1956, it borrowed specifically from a lot of Chinese kung fu movies. And I'm not just saying that because I'm Chinese. I'm saying that because I grew up watching those
only
things.
for
No.
a certain dance style, which is old way.
Is what?
Only for certain dance styles, which is old way.
But in general,
Yeah, but that's all voguing was until about 1992. It was all old way.
And then the dance
static
evolved.
poses, the voguing, but also from Egyptian references. If you look at the classical old way voguing, there are certain poses and things which are very specifically referring not to sub-Saharan African, but to northern Sudan and African poses. Furthermore, gymnastics, which are completely an Olympics, a European invention. So it's truly a rainbow. Right, it's a rainbow coalition built into the dance from the start with a hope that all of these things can come together, and it's not framed from many of the people who created it only in black and white terms. And when we start seeing things that only black people have the right to speak about it, and white people from differing experiences. For example, why do so many Russian kids right now vogue amazingly? I've met German girls who grew up in Lichtenberg here, out in the suburbs, in Pankow, who dance better than a lot of the black people I've met in Brooklyn, just because it might be a spiritual power that they have inside or need to express themselves, right?
Okay.
So-
Thank
yes,
you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I
Thank
think
you.
I've said enough, but
Yes.
I believe in something universal, and that's why we're here.
Okay. All right, so
yes.
everybody has a right to their opinion, and it's good for us to hear
Definitely.
and to listen to the various thoughts and feelings that are out there. So this is like an open space right now. Yeah? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just like it's like a 2-second thing, only just to say that, you know, culture is already hybrid. And if you want to talk about voguing, you could, you know, in the kind of pageantry, you can look at the pansy balls in New York and Harlem in the 1920s. You can talk about how chanting is similar to scatting and jazz. So, I mean, the kind of list is endless of where the kind of cultural borrowings and where kind of, voguing takes from different spaces.
I also want to point to like academia being a very inaccessible space, and knowing and having access to the knowledge of the lineage of this movement is an extremely privileged thing. something that is not a privilege that a lot of people who go to the balls or are at the balls or created the balls have. So they don't have access to this information. You can't come for them thinking like they're appropriating white culture when white culture is clearly appropriating black culture, right? And that's it's circular, but it really is still Africanist. It's still based in African movement, African aesthetic. And so we have to, we can't like talk about reverse racism sort of. Like this is sort of, to me, I can conflate the two. I know you're not saying that. I know you're not saying that. I'm conflating the two because they're kind of the same.
People want the part of a cake.
Sorry,
It's not your
just
turn to
for
talk.
One second, please. Yeah.
Okay, okay, one at a time, and you wanted to say something? Oh, I'm sorry. And then this person,
Hi, I have a question about the very first remark that you made about black culture being promiscuous and that it spreads. I'm from the Dutch Caribbean, and I grew up in the Netherlands, and I'm South Asian, and I know two black cultures. I know the Dutch Caribbean black culture, and I know the American black culture. And I just happened to notice, as I was observing white Dutch people as I was growing up, that they didn't really embrace Dutch Caribbean culture, which is actually very much, very clearly linked to African culture in its movements and in its traditions and the languages and all the rituals around it. It's actually not at all appreciated or valued, whereas American black culture is very much valued. And I was wondering if you had considered that perhaps it's not so much the black culture as voguing and hip-hop that is exported to Europe, but it's American culture, and hip-hop and voguing are basically surfing on the American media machine. Because whenever there was a Dutch Caribbean song in the charts in the Netherlands, it was kind of laughed upon and seen as like coconut banana song. But when it was an American black, then it was cool, and we had the soul show and all of that. So I just wanted to make that remark. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, please.
No, of course, you're part of the band.
Just very, very quickly, and then we should, that, of course, it is, you know, as you say, American culture is looked upon as hip and cool and all that, not Dutch Caribbean culture, but you have to understand that American culture is black American culture. Yeah. That's all.
Would also want to tack onto that what is sold in the media is something that is outside of the construct or things that the African American community controls. And I don't identify as African American, but I also realize that African American culture is quite central in the conversation on blackness globally. And there's a reason for that, right? There's money probably involved in this, right?
You wanted to speak with the hat.
I started voguing in 1992, and what I liked about Daniel's comment is that being part of the voguing community long before you, Melody, started your house in Berlin. I love your house. I come to your events. I mean, I just don't compete. I'm old, and what I want to say is like what I missed in this panel is how the capitalism excludes people, and what I found in voguing was how, as a poor person, I found a way to express myself, and even if I was a people of color as a Croatian in Germany, not being like a black person, but being like an outsider, as being a foreigner in Germany. And what I missed in this panel was also like the capitalistic mistreatment in this way of expressing culture. This is what I want to say. Therefore, I loved what Daniel said, that voguing was also a part where you, as a person of color, even if you're not a black person, if you're like a Croatian person or a Hispanic person or like an Asian person, found something how to identify and how to express yourself, even if it was imitating a white woman from a white fashion magazine. Because it's not called ebonying or ebonizing, it's called voguing. And so this is what I missed there. And
So yeah. No. If I could, no. But if I just may, so I think. Oh yeah, so we can see you guys. Ist es möglich, das Licht ein bisschen zu ändern, das Publikumslicht anzumachen? Ja, damit wir die Leute ein bisschen sehen und vielleicht den ein bisschen runter, damit wir nicht so. Dankeschön. Super. Perfect. This feels like home. Okay. Yes. So I see the point that you're getting. The voguing culture, as well as, in my opinion, any urban underground dance culture coming from America, because obviously I guess the Black African culture coming together in America specifically created a very interesting energy. But like she said, it's still all African-based culture. And I get the point that you mean it's very infectious, it's very inclusive when we're talking about the club culture in New York, for example. Back then in the clubs, there were people of all different races, of all different places, because that was the only place all these people that might only had one thing in common, that they might not have money, or maybe the same color, maybe the same sexual orientation, maybe nothing, you never know. But all they had in common, they were in the safe space, the music was there, the people were there, the sharing were there, something spiritual happened. It's in a club, but if you listen to house music, they call it the sanctuary. In voguing, there's a lot of things that remind of some kind of ritual or spiritual manifest in a way, as the master of ceremony on the microphone, guiding what is happening right there. And yeah, it is a Black culture, and I think it's a bit difficult at the moment in Europe about the spreading, that there are different ways it spread. So you have people, the most simple people, that they see voguing and they watch a video, I do it, I teach it. No connection at all to the real life deal. It's all about social media, what you see, what you, I got it, okay. So then you have choreographers that are maybe a bit more smart. So they go to a workshop or two, they take all the things, they're a good dancer, skilled dancers, so they catch the movement fast. They do their own TV show, boom, perfect. You have people like me, for example, that are a bit in between. We live the culture, we try to promote the culture in a cultural way, obviously, but at the same time, I'm a dancer. I have to make my money. I invest most of my money and my time in what I did the last 4 years for voguing. So there should also be a balance, in a way, but a balance. Yeah, it should not be like this. And for this part, there's several people in Europe that started as pioneers their own scene, like in Italy and Sweden, it's mainly females or white people or straight people or one of the three. So that's one way of it creating people that really fell in love, like me traveled to New York over several years, over several times to really get to understand it. There was a small group of people that traveled within Europe to every event that you could think of, where there was even one person from voguing and whacking. We're totally messed up in vaguing back then, yeah? That's definitely, but information was there, luckily for us. Now there's even more information through YouTube, so it's even easier than for people out of my generation, yeah? And the other problem, I think, how voguing comes apart is Europeans go to America, they participate actively in the balls. Europeans like that, Americans see that. I cannot judge if they like it or not, but anyway, there's something interesting, so they name them part of their house. And there's some people that do it like shopping on eBay, you, so that internationally I have my house representing. There are others that really see a talent and just be like, I like you. Others are a bit more selective, and I guess the way it used to be originally, that you really are somehow part of the community, the family, before you enter a house, not because you're a great dancer. So this obviously also gives like a bit of a free pass to a lot of, let's put it blank, white people, to be like, I'm part of the community because American legend picked me, and he said, I'm this. And maybe even made them father or mother of a chapter in their country. And I guess Stephane has more to add.
Madison wanted to add something?
No, just the only thing is that I just want to make sure that we are constantly thinking about the fact that voguing is not just movement or choreography. It is Black queer space, period.
I think there's somebody in the audience who doesn't like that.
You can, but you know what? I'm concerned because we are now 5 after 10, and what we need to do is find out if there's anybody else here who has something burning that they would like to say to these panelists.
Hi, everyone. I'm way older than I look.
Are you way younger than I am?
Well, there we go. I just wanted to say that I think it's been very interesting being in this room because I feel like it's a microcosm of what happens in the broader world, which is any time Black people get together to talk about something, they're constantly undermined and questioned and ridiculed. And I feel like this is a cycle that happened.
Yes, please come here.
I feel like anytime we try to assert something, it's always thrown back at us. If we say racism exists, no, it doesn't. What do you mean? It's fine. It's perfect. If we say that voguing is a Black thing, no, what do you mean? There's this and this and this. I just feel like it's a cycle, and I wondered if the panel might talk about how this cycle might be broken, like how we might effectively combat this kind of thing that happens every time we try and talk about ourselves.
Thank you. And you know what? Thank you. If not only the panelists, if anybody else out there can, regardless of what your ethnicity is, if anybody else has any thoughts about how this cycle can be broken, and you so eloquently and elegantly pointed it out, okay? Any ideas? I don't know.
Well, if Brenda don't know, I mean, I feel like that is a very important question. And we should all actively be asking ourselves this question and answering it in the ways we know best how to. But it is true that this happens a lot, so remember that. The next time you're in a space that is centering a Black subjectivity or Black culture, and there are Black panelists sitting in front of you saying, hey, we know something about it, you shouldn't question it. It's not here, like we weren't placed here to be questioned. And we were not also placed here to educate you only this one time. If you really want to know about voguing, if you really want to know about the community, you need to go outside of this room. Yes. Okay?
Tonight, for example, we have a function. You can come.
There's a function, apparently, is it this Saturday?
It's today, actually.
It's
After
today.
this, so you can get ready and,
Yes.
see it for yourselves. See what the tea is.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. And then we're going to try to wind this up in the next 5 minutes, okay? Oh, please, Mother Stephane.
Huh? Anybody has any other questions?
I think this contention around this particular part of the issue is at the heart of the ballroom space itself, because it's Black people and Latino people creating space for themselves, and that's always going to be a problem. So those who may sit somewhere in the periphery or even inside in ways may feel entitled to that space because Black bodies and Black creativity and genius has always been pillaged, always. There's no boundary around that. So I think the only way to get over that issue is just to listen to Black people when they're speaking about it, just like Niv said. Like, just listen. And maybe you disagree, but you have to listen. Because if you're not, you're replicating that same colonialist, anti-Blackness over again. Even if that's not the intention, it replicates it. We need to be heard.
Thank you. Any closing statements from here?
I think there was a question somewhere, yeah.
So I'm really new to the topic of voguing. It's the first time I'm hearing something about it. But what I hear is that
I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
It's the first time that I hear or see something about voguing. But what I hear from the panel is that it's very important to know about the context of voguing, and that this is missing in Europe maybe, or so a solution could be to always raise the awareness of this context. But for example, I saw some videos on YouTube from you, for example, where you were showing some movements, some instructions, but you were not talking about voguing. What is voguing, or what is the context of voguing? So in this example, you're missing an opportunity to tell something about it.
Yeah.
So
No, I think it's to me. Yeah. Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Yeah, definitely. In that context, in that YouTube video, probably yes. The question is what it was for, in which context, and even if I would give a 5-hour interview with the New York Times, they could print only one single word, me saying, cunt. So that's one thing, but your point is totally right. If you have the opportunity, anybody, you should mention the context. You should mention where it's from. Whenever I teach, for example, that's the first thing I ask. Who's new? Who knows about voguing? If you don't know, first of all, it's black, it's gay, it's queer. If you have a problem with that, otherwise stay along and find out if you have a problem or not. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But yeah, as definitely everybody should take the opportunity, but at the same time, other people, and I guess in this context, people that have money, people that are in positions, should also take the personal step to look for artists from the community and not take a white washed down version that might have some kind of, I don't know, award from some contemporary dance thing. And, so everybody has a part of their responsibility, the community, as well as the people using the culture, wanting to show the dance, wanting to showcase it. Yeah, everybody has to take their responsibility.
I think you make a really good point, too, in terms of how our words get twisted and painted for us, right? That's so much of what is disempowered in our subjectivity. Like, we are actively dealing with people telling us that we're wrong, that our struggle and pain or life is not real, or nor should we think of it as real, right? And it's taught to us and given to us this way. It's fed to us, all of us, this way. And we have to work dutifully to recognize when that is happening. So when you say something like, why didn't you seize the opportunity? I would venture to say that lacks an intersection. That lacks an intersection of knowing that when people in power, media specifically, being quite capitalist and quite white, is going to twist the history, it's going to twist the knowledge, okay? And so you have to go to the source. You can't rely on YouTube, unfortunately. You can't rely on this panel. And don't make your black friends work for you for free.
This is not really a question, but more like a remark. First of all, I wanted to thank all of you for your patience and for everything you said. And the second thing is that, thank you for organizing this, by the way. Thank you. Instead of, blah, blah, blah. No, I really appreciate it because like the questions that are coming up at this panel and the stuff you say is what I'm thinking about, especially like as a person of color. I was born and raised here, although 90% of the people who see me don't believe that, but as a person of color who listens to hip hop, who likes to dance, of course, like all these questions are coming up in my mind. Okay, am I appropriating black culture while I'm dancing or not? So, I mean, I would love to see this panel in a broader context, like in hip hop dance and house dance, at least in Germany, because that's the context I know best about all of the other European countries.
Make it happen, girl. Make it happen.
All right, I'll try.
And there are many people who, again, there are many people of color who can speak to these issues because we live it. We live them. And, you know, it would be wonderful if there is some way, again, the guy who talked about the capitalism or whatever and what he didn't see in this panel. So make your own panel and bring us in and pay people.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, people, you know what I'm going to do, even though obviously we could go on and on and on. But that's the point. Let us leave at a point where we can go on and where I hope that each of you will indeed, you know, do the Olympic thing and take that torch, you know, and go forward with it and indeed walk the walk. And let us thank the panelists again.